Hello everyone, and welcome back. Tonight's story is 10 Strange Rules for My Job at the Abandoned Mountain Town. Don't break them. Creepypasta. The town was hidden high in the mountains, long forgotten by most. A ghost town, or so I thought. But when I accepted a job there, I was given a set of rules. Strange, unsettling rules that made no sense at first. Rules about which streets to avoid, what to do when the church bell rings at midnight, and why you must never look into the windows of empty houses. I didn't believe them until I broke one. If you enjoy these disturbing creepypastas, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? I always love seeing where everyone is tuning in. Now, let's begin. Ethan is gone because of me. He's gone because I thought the rules were a joke, a game. Now I sit in this quiet room, and the silence is the loudest thing I've ever heard. It's filled with the memory of his laugh and the final, terrible sound the bell made when it rang for him. The town took him. It took him because I didn't listen, and I have to live with that. I have to tell you what happened. I have to tell you about Blackwood Creek and the job that cost my best friend his life. It all started because we were broke. Not just a little bit broke, but the kind of broke where you're splitting a single instant ramen packet for dinner. College was just a year away, and both Ethan and I had exactly $0 saved up. We worked part-time jobs at the mall, him at the pretzel stand, and me at the bookstore. But that barely covered gas for my beat-up car and the occasional pizza. We needed something big, a summer job that would give us a real head start. That's when I found the ad online. It was on some obscure job board, buried under dozens of listings for fast food and retail. The title was simple: Caretaker Needed for Historic Mountain Property. The description was strange. It was so vague. It said the job involved light maintenance, groundskeeping, and security for a remote, privately owned town. The town was called Blackwood Creek. The ad said it was preserved for historical significance. The pay was the thing that caught my eye, the thing that made us ignore all the warning signs. It was unbelievable. More money than either of our parents made in a year. Enough to buy a decent used car and cover a huge chunk of our first year's tuition, with plenty left over. I showed it to Ethan. He was leaning back in his chair in my messy bedroom, scrolling on his phone, half listening to me complain about being broke for the 10th time that day. "Dude, look at this," I said, turning my laptop towards him. He squinted at the screen. Blackwood Creek? Never heard of it. Remote mountain property? Sounds like the beginning of a horror movie. "Look at the pay, man," I urged him, pointing at the number on the screen. His eyes went wide. He sat up, straight, the front legs of his chair hitting the floor with a thud. "Whoa, that can't be real. That's like doctor money, right? What's the catch?" "The catch is you get murdered by a guy in a hockey mask," he laughed. But the laugh didn't quite reach his eyes. We both felt it. There was something deeply off about the whole thing. But we were 19 and desperate. And when you're that age, you think you're immortal. We convinced ourselves it was probably for some rich, eccentric millionaire who owned a ghost town as a hobby. We'd just be cutting grass and fixing fences all summer. Easy money. So we applied. We sent a single, joint email with both of our names on it. We didn't expect a reply. We figured it was a typo or a scam. We got one less than an hour later, The email was short and had no greeting, no sign-off. It just said, "Be at the Granite Peak Diner on Highway 9 at 8 a.m. this Friday. Come alone. You will receive further instructions." There was no name, no company letterhead, no phone number, just those stark, simple sentences. It was another huge red flag, waving right in our faces. A normal person would have deleted the email and forgotten all about it. But we weren't normal. We were 19. We thought we were invincible, and we were blinded by the dollar signs. Ethan grinned. Road trip. The drive up to the diner took 3 hours. We left before the sun was up, the car filled with cheap coffee from a gas station and the sound of a terrible rock playlist. The farther we drove into the mountains, the more the world seemed to change. The wide 4-lane highways shrunk to 2 lanes, then to a single winding road with no shoulder. The trees grew taller and thicker, their branches hanging over the asphalt like a dark, gloomy tunnel. Cell service died about an hour out. I remember a weird feeling settling in my gut. It felt like we were driving off the edge of the map, away from the entire world. The Granite Peak Diner was a tiny, sad-looking place on the side of a lonely highway. A single, rusty logging truck was parked outside. We went in and sat in a cracked vinyl booth. A tired-looking waitress took our order for more coffee. We kept looking at the door, expecting a man in a fancy suit or something, but the minutes ticked by. 8 a.m. came and went. Then 8:15. "Maybe we got stood up," Ethan said, stirring his coffee with a spoon. "Or maybe it was a prank," I muttered, feeling like a complete idiot. Just then, the old man sitting at the counter stood up. He was wearing dusty overalls and a faded flannel shirt. He looked like he'd been a part of the diner's furniture for the last 50 years. He walked over to our table, his boots scuffing on the linoleum floor. He was holding a large, yellowed envelope. "You the boys for the Blackwood Creek job?" he asked. His voice was raspy, like gravel rolling downhill. We just nodded, completely surprised. He dropped the envelope on the table. It landed with a heavy thud. "Everything you need to know is in there. The keys, the rules, a map." He looked at both of us, his eyes a pale, faded blue. There was no warmth in them at all. It felt like he was looking right through us, at something far away. "Listen to me," he said, his voice dropping low, serious. "You take this job. You follow every single rule on that paper, to the letter. You don't ask questions. You don't get clever. You do what the paper says. You understand me?" I just stared at him, my throat suddenly dry. It was Ethan who finally spoke. "Yeah, okay, we get it." The old man grunted, a small, unhappy sound. He turned and walked out of the diner without another word. He got into the rusty truck outside and drove away, heading back down the mountain, back towards civilization. It felt like he was escaping, leaving us behind. We waited a minute before I picked up the envelope. My hands were shaking a little. Inside was a set of old, heavy iron keys on a simple ring, a hand-drawn map on brittle paper, and a single sheet of paper folded twice. At the top of the paper, typed out on what looked like an ancient typewriter, was the word "rules." Ethan grabbed the map. "Looks like it's another 20 miles up a service road." I unfolded the paper. My eyes scanned the list. My stomach tightened into a cold knot. "Ethan," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "you need to see this." The list was simple. 10 rules. But they weren't normal rules for a groundskeeping job. They were strange. They made no sense at all. Rule number 1. The workday is from sunrise to sunset. You must be inside your assigned cabin before the last ray of sunlight disappears behind the western ridge. No exceptions. Rule number 2. You will be provided with a generator for electricity. It is to be turned off every night at 10 p.m. sharp. Do not leave it running later. They don't like the noise. They? Ethan asked, looking over my shoulder. Who's they? I didn't have an answer. I kept reading. Rule number 3. The town bell in the square will ring at noon and 6 p.m. These are the only scheduled times. If you hear the bell ring at any other time, it is not for you. Do not react. Do not look towards the bell tower. Go inside immediately and wait for it to stop. My heart started beating a little faster. This was more than just weird. This felt genuinely wrong. This is a joke, right? Ethan said, but his voice was tight, uncertain. It's some kind of weird hazing for the new guys. I wanted to believe him. I really did. It has to be, I said, trying to convince myself more than him. We followed the map. The service road was more like a dirt trail, rocky and overgrown. The car bounced and scraped along for what felt like forever. The air got colder. The silence out here was absolute. There were no birds, no squirrels, nothing. Just the sound of our engine and the crunch of gravel under the tires. Then, after a final sharp turn, we saw it. The town of Blackwood Creek was nestled in a small valley, surrounded by towering, dark green pine trees that blocked out most of the sky. It was like a place trapped in time. There was a single main street with wooden buildings on either side. A general store, a blacksmith, a saloon, all with faded paint and boarded-up windows. In the center of the town was a small square with a stone bell tower rising from the middle. It was completely silent, dead silent. The air was thick and heavy, and it smelled of pine needles and damp earth, and something else, something faint, but sweet and cloying, almost like old, cheap perfume that had gone bad. At the end of the street was a small cabin. It looked newer than the rest of the town. A thin curl of smoke was rising from its chimney. This must be our cabin. As we pulled up, I looked over at the bell tower. It stood there, dark and imposing against the gray sky. A shiver went down my spine. That was the first time I felt it. The feeling that we were not alone. The feeling that we were being watched. We got out of the car. The silence was so complete, it felt like a pressure against my eardrums. "Well," Ethan said, forcing a cheerful tone. "Home, sweet home." But as he spoke, his eyes were locked on the bell tower. I knew he felt it too. We had made a terrible mistake, and we were just getting started. The list in my pocket felt 100 pounds heavier. We had only read the first 3 rules. There were still 7 more to go, and we were about to find out why every single one of them mattered. Little did I know, that first glance at the bell tower was the beginning of the end. We walked towards the cabin, our footsteps sounding way too loud in the oppressive quiet. The porch boards creaked under our weight. I fumbled with the old iron keys, my fingers feeling clumsy and cold. One of the keys fit the lock. With a heavy click, the door swung open. Inside it was simple, but clean. Shockingly clean. There were 2 beds, a small wooden table with 2 chairs, a stone fireplace, and a tiny kitchen area in the corner. What was strange was that it was fully stocked. The pantry was filled with canned goods, pasta, and rice. The small fridge, which wasn't running, was packed with water bottles and jerky. A brand new bright yellow generator sat next to the back door, along with several large cans of gasoline. Someone had prepared this for us. It felt less like a rustic job site and more like a carefully set trap. Ethan let out a low whistle. Well, they weren't kidding about taking care of us. He dropped his duffel bag on one of the beds. Guess this is me. I put my bag on the other bed, my eyes still scanning the room. Everything was just a little too perfect, a little too neat. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had just been here, moments before we arrived. I walked over to the single window which looked out onto the main street and the bell tower. The glass was old and wavy, distorting the view just enough to make it look unreal, like a painting. Pulled the folded paper out of my pocket. It felt cold in my hand. We should read the rest of these. Ethan flopped down on his bed, lacing his hands behind his head. All right, lay it on me. Let's hear the rest of the crazy. I sat at the small table and smoothed the paper out. The typed letters were stark and black against the yellowed page. I took a breath and continued where I left off. Rule number 4. The general store is unlocked. You may take any non-perishable food or supplies you need. For every item you take, you must leave a small, smooth stone from the creek bed on the counter. Make the trade exact. 1 item, 1 stone. Okay, that's just weird, Ethan said, sitting up. An honor system with rocks? What's the point of that? I don't know, I said, my voice low. Maybe it's symbolic. I kept reading. Rule number 5. You will occasionally see figures at the edge of town, especially at dawn and dusk. These are the residents. Do not approach them. Do not wave. Do not speak to them unless spoken to first. If they ask you a question, your answer must be a lie. They feed on truth. A cold dread washed over me. Residents? Ethan, this place is supposed to be abandoned. He was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its joking edge. It's a prank, man. It has to be. They've set up cameras somewhere, and they're going to put this on the internet. Scares in the woods or something. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. But my gut was screaming that this was real. I read the next one. Rule number 6. The saloon's piano will play by itself some nights. The song is always the same. Do not try to find the source of the music. It is a memory, and it doesn't like to be disturbed. Rule number 7. Your personal effects, things from your life back home, should remain in the cabin. Do not leave clothing, tools, or especially photographs of loved ones outside overnight. The town gets lonely. It likes to keep souvenirs. I thought about the picture of my little sister I kept in my wallet. I instinctively put a hand over my back pocket. Rule number 8. Your work area is the town itself. Do not follow the creek upstream into the woods, and do not cross the old wooden bridge on the south trail. The woods do not belong to the town. What is out there does not follow the same rules. Rule number 9. There is a mirror in the washroom. Before you turn off the generator for the night, you must cover it with a towel. Some nights, the face you see in it might not be your own. Don't give it a chance to look back at you. I glanced towards the small closed door that I assumed was the washroom. I felt a sudden, powerful urge to nail it shut. Ethan finally got off the bed and came to look at the list with me. He read the last rule over my shoulder. His breath hitched. Rule number 10. If you break a rule, you will not receive a warning. There is no one here to punish you. The town itself will correct the mistake. All corrections are final. Final. Ethan whispered. "What the hell does that mean?" I folded the paper and shoved it back into my pocket. "I don't know, and I don't want to find out." We stood there in silence for a minute, the weight of those words hanging in the air. The perfect, well-stocked cabin suddenly felt like a cage. Ethan finally broke the silence. Okay, let's just assume it's an elaborate prank, a psychological test to see if we're tough enough for the isolation. We do the work, follow the dumb rules just in case, and we get paid. Simple. "And if it's not a prank?" I asked. He looked at me, his eyes serious. "Then we follow the rules even closer." We spent the rest of the afternoon working. It felt good to do something normal, something physical. We found a shed behind the cabin with lawnmowers, weed whackers, and tools. It seemed our main job, at least for now, was to reclaim the town from nature. I started mowing the thick, knee-high grass in the town square while Ethan worked on clearing the weeds that were choking the wooden boardwalks. The constant roar of the lawnmower was a comfort. It drowned out the suffocating silence. As I worked my way around the bell tower, I tried not to look at it. I focused on the ground, on the satisfying sight of the wild grass being cut down to a neat, green carpet. For a few hours, we could almost pretend we were just two guys with a normal summer job. But the town wouldn't let us forget. I was mowing near the building marked doctor's office when the mower sputtered and died. I had run out of gas. As the engine noise faded, the silence rushed back in, 10 times louder than before. And in that silence, I heard something, a faint creak. I looked up at the doctor's office. It was a 2-story building, the paint peeling off in long strips. The windows were dark with grime, but I could have sworn I saw a curtain move in the second-floor window. Just a tiny twitch. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stared at the window, waiting, but nothing happened. It was probably just the wind, I told myself, a draft in an old, broken-down building. I was about to turn away when I saw it. For just a second, a pale face seemed to materialize in the dark rectangle of the window. It wasn't clear, more like a smudge of white in the darkness, but it had eyes, and they were looking right at me. I blinked, and it was gone. "Ethan!" I yelled, my voice cracking. He shut off his weed whacker and jogged over. "What's up?" "See a bear?" "In the window," I said, pointing. "Up there, I saw someone." We both stared at the window. It was empty, just a dark, dusty pane of glass. "Dude, you're letting the list get to you," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "It's just shadows and old glass. Come on, let's get more gas." I let him lead me away, but I couldn't stop looking back. I knew what I saw, or at least I thought I did. The first seed of real, gut-wrenching fear had been planted. That was the first sign that the rules weren't a game. I should have listened to that fear. I should have told Ethan we needed to leave right then and there. We worked until the sun began to dip below the sharp peaks of the western mountains. A golden, hazy light filled the small valley. It was beautiful, but it was also a warning. Rule number 1. You must be inside your assigned cabin before the last ray of sunlight disappears. "We should probably call it a day," I said, my voice tight. Ethan was trying to pry a stubborn root from the boardwalk. "Almost got it. Just a few more minutes." "No, man. Look at the sun," I insisted. "The rule." He sighed, annoyed. "It's not even dark yet. We have plenty of time." A new kind of panic, sharp and cold, shot through me. "I'm not messing around with this, Ethan." I'm going in." I left him there and walked quickly back to the cabin. Every shadow seemed to stretch and twist, reaching for me. The sweet, cloying smell in the air was stronger now. When I got inside, I turned and watched him through the doorway. He was still wrestling with the root, his back to the setting sun. The last brilliant sliver of orange light was sinking behind the ridge. My heart pounded. "Ethan, get in here, now!" I screamed, the words tearing out of my throat. He finally gave up, threw his tool down in frustration, and started jogging towards the cabin just as the final bit of light vanished, plunging the valley into a deep purple twilight. He stumbled through the door, and I slammed it shut, throwing the deadbolt. It was only then that I realized I was panting, my whole body trembling. That was the first time we almost broke a rule. It wouldn't be the last. Ethan leaned against the closed door, catching his breath. "Dude, you're going to give yourself a heart attack." It was like 2 seconds. "I don't care," I said, my voice shaky. "The rule says before the last ray of light. Not during, not after. Before." He looked at me, a mix of annoyance and concern on his face. "Okay, man. Okay, I get it. We'll be more careful." We started the generator. Its loud, chugging roar was a welcome invasion of the thick silence. It felt like pushing back the darkness. We turned on the few bare bulbs in the cabin and made dinner. Canned chili heated up on a small hot plate. We ate without talking much. The strange events of the day, the old man at the diner, the creepy rules, the face in the window, the race against the sunset, had drained us. After we ate, I sat at the table, staring at the list of rules again, as if reading them one more time would make them make sense. Ethan was trying to find a signal on a small handheld radio he'd brought. All he got was static. "Nothing," he said, clicking it off in frustration. "We're completely cut off." That realization hit me harder than I expected. No phones, no internet, no radio, no way to call for help if something went wrong. We were truly on our own. The hours crawled by. The world outside our windows was pitch black. Black, not just dark, but a deep, inky blackness I'd never seen before. There was no moon, no stars, just a complete void where the town should be. The generator hummed outside, our only anchor to the normal world. At 9:55 p.m., I looked at my watch. Time to shut it down. We went through a small routine. I went to the washroom. The mirror on the medicine cabinet was small and spotted with age. My own reflection looked pale and scared. Following rule number 9, I took the hand towel from the rack and carefully draped it over the mirror. It felt stupid, like a child's game to ward off monsters. But I did it anyway. Ethan was waiting by the back door. At exactly 10 p.m., he reached out and flipped the switch on the generator. The engine sputtered and died. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a physical presence, pressing in on us from all sides. The sudden plunge into total darkness, broken only by the 2 weak flashlight beams we held, was terrifying. We were a tiny island of light in an ocean of black. "Well," Ethan whispered, his voice sounding small and thin, "this is something." We got into our beds. We didn't bother changing. We just kicked off our boots and crawled under the thin blankets. For a long time, neither of us spoke. We just listened to the silence. And then we started to hear things. The old cabin groaned and settled. The wind, which we hadn't noticed while the generator was on, whistled faintly through a crack in the window frame. And then we heard the footsteps. They were soft, barely there. The sound of someone walking slowly on the dirt of the main street. Crunch, pause, crunch, pause. My entire body went rigid. I held my breath, straining to listen. Ethan was perfectly still in the bed across from me. I could feel his fear, even in the dark. The footsteps came closer. They sounded like they were right outside our cabin now. They stopped at our porch. We heard the old wood of the steps creak once, twice. Someone, or something, was standing right outside our door. I squeezed my eyes shut. I was thinking about the locks, the simple deadbolt, how easily it could be broken. My heart felt like it was going to explode. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Then we heard the creak of the porch swing. It was a slow, rhythmic sound. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Someone was sitting on our porch, just a few feet away from us, separated only by a thin wooden wall. Neither of us moved. We lay there like statues, barely breathing, for hours. I don't know when the sound stopped. I don't know when I finally fell into a restless, nightmare-filled sleep. I just know that when I woke up, the first gray light of dawn was filtering through the window, and the only sound was the frantic beating of my own heart. Ethan was already awake, sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at the door. "Did you hear it?" I whispered. He nodded slowly. The whole night. We didn't talk about it. We didn't need to. Both knew this wasn't a prank. This was real. The first week fell into a strange, tense routine. We would wake with the sun, start the generator, and get to work. We cleared the entire main street of weeds and mowed all the grass. We started repairing broken shutters and reinforcing loose porch railings. We worked hard, focusing on the tasks, trying not to think about the nights. Every day, just before sunset, we would race back to the cabin, slam the door, and wait for the darkness. Every night, at 10 p.m., we'd kill the generator, and every night, the sounds would start. Sometimes it was footsteps. Sometimes it was a soft, humming sound, like a woman singing a lullaby with no words. One night, we heard a faint scratching at the back door, like a dog wanting to be let in. It went on for almost an hour. We just lay there, frozen in our beds, until it stopped. We learned to live with a constant, low-level hum of fear. It became our new normal. On the 5th day, we ran out of coffee. It was a small thing, but it felt huge, a link to our old lives. "Guess we have to go to the store," Ethan said, looking at the empty can. I thought of rule number 4, 1 item, 1 stone. "All right," I said, "let's go." We walked down to the general store. The sign above the door was so faded you could barely read it. The door was unlocked, just like the rules said. It swung open with a long, complaining creak. Inside, it was dark and smelled of dust and decay. But behind the thick layer of grime, the store was perfectly preserved. Shelves were lined with cans, their labels faded but readable. There were barrels of what might have once been flour or sugar. Behind a glass counter were jars of old-fashioned candy. It was like stepping into a photograph from 100 years ago. "This is insane," Ethan breathed, looking around. "It's a museum." We found a shelf with cans of coffee. We each grabbed one. Then came the weird part. We walked out of the store and down to the creek bed that ran along the edge of town. The water was clear and cold. We searched the bank until we each found a small, smooth gray stone worn down by the water. We went back to the store, placed the 2 stones on the dusty counter right in the middle, and left. The whole thing felt like some bizarre, sacred ritual. We had made the trade. As we were walking back to the cabin, a movement at the edge of the woods caught my eye. I stopped, my heart jumping into my throat. Standing just inside the tree line, about 50 yards away, was a figure. It was tall and unnaturally thin. It was wearing what looked like a dark, old-fashioned dress that went all the way to the ground. It was hard to make out its face in the shadows of the trees, but I could tell it was watching us. It was one of them, a resident. "Ethan, don't look," I hissed, grabbing his arm. "What? What is it?" "Rule number 5, I whispered. "Just walk. Don't look." We walked back to the cabin, our pace quickening. I could feel its eyes on my back the entire way. The feeling was cold and heavy, like a physical weight. When we finally got inside and shut the door, I leaned against it, my legs weak with relief. Ethan went to the window. "It's gone," he said. I had never been so scared in my life. The face in the window was one thing. This was different. This was real. We had seen a resident, and I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that it wouldn't be the last time. The town was slowly revealing itself to us piece by piece, and every new piece was more terrifying than the last. We were trapped in its game, and we were only just beginning to learn the rules. After seeing the resident, the tone of our days shifted. The work was no longer a distraction. It was a necessity. We kept our heads down, focusing on our tasks with a frantic energy. We didn't want to have idle time. We didn't want to let our eyes wander to the edges of the woods. But we were always aware. Every snap of a twig, every gust of wind rustling the leaves, made us jump. The feeling of being watched was constant now. About 2 weeks into our stay, the noon bell rang, just as it always did. We had gotten used to its loud, clear peal echoing through the valley. It marked the middle of our day. We were working on the roof of the blacksmith shop, replacing old, rotting shingles. We paused, taking a break for lunch. We sat on the peak of the roof, eating beef jerky and drinking water, our legs dangling over the edge. The bell finished its 12 rings. The silence returned. We were about to get back to work when it happened. Bong! A single, jarring ring. It was out of place. It wasn't noon. It wasn't 6 p.m. My blood ran cold. I grabbed Ethan's arm, my fingers digging into his bicep. "Don't look," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I was staring straight ahead at the faded sign of the general store across the street. But in my peripheral vision, I could see the bell tower. I could feel it. Bong! Another ring, louder this time. It vibrated in my chest. Rule number 3. If you hear the bell ring at any other time, it is not for you. Do not react. Do not look towards the bell tower. Go inside immediately and wait for it to stop. We were on a roof. The cabin was 100 yards away. We couldn't just go inside. "What do we do?" Ethan whispered, his voice tight with panic. "We don't react," I said, my own heart hammering. We just sit here. We don't look. We wait for it to stop." Bong! This one was different. It sounded angry. It was a sharp, violent sound, like the bell was being struck with a sledgehammer. I squeezed my eyes shut. I focused on the feeling of the rough shingles under my hands. I tried to block out the sound. Bong! 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 It was ringing faster now, a frantic, desperate rhythm. It was a warning, an alarm. My entire body was screaming at me to look, to see what was happening. But the old man's words echoed in my head. "You do what the paper says." I don't know how long. We sat there, frozen on that roof, as the bell rang and rang. It felt like hours. Every peal was a physical blow, Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence that followed was more deafening than the noise. We waited a full 5 minutes, not moving, not speaking. Finally, I opened my eyes. Is it over?" Ethan asked. "I think so," I said. We scrambled down the ladder, our hands shaking. We didn't say another word. We just packed up our tools and went back to the cabin, even though it was the middle of the day. We didn't feel safe outside anymore. That night was worse than any before. After we shut off the generator, the noises started almost immediately. It wasn't just footsteps or humming, it was talking. A low, continuous murmur of voices from all around the cabin. We couldn't make out any words. It was like listening to a crowd of people whispering just on the other side of a wall. It rose and fell, sometimes sounding like an argument, sometimes like a sad, collective sigh. And then the music started. It was a piano, a tinny, out-of-tune piano playing a simple, melancholy tune. It was coming from the direction of the saloon. Rule number 6. The saloon's piano will play by itself some nights. The song is always the same. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, but also deeply sad. It was a song full of loss and regret. It played over and over, weaving in and out of the whispering voices. We lay in our beds, pulling the blankets up to our chins like little kids, listening to the ghost orchestra of Blackwood Creek. Little did I know that was the last quiet night we would have. The next morning, something was different. The air felt heavier, charged with a strange energy. As we stepped out of the cabin, I saw it immediately. My work gloves, which I had accidentally left on the porch railing the night before, were gone. "No," I whispered. Rule number 7. Do not leave personal effects outside overnight. The town gets lonely. It likes to keep souvenirs. It was such a small thing, a pair of $10 gloves, but it was a violation, a message. The town had taken something of mine. Ethan saw the look on my face. "What's wrong?" "My gloves. They were right here." He looked at the empty railing, and he understood. "It's okay, man. It's just gloves. I have an extra pair, but it wasn't okay. A rule had been broken, and according to rule number 10, the town would correct the mistake." I spent the whole day looking over my shoulder, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. The day was quiet. Too quiet. Even the noon and 6 p.m. bells didn't ring. The silence was absolute, and it was terrifying. That night, we double-checked everything. We brought all the tools inside. We made sure nothing, absolutely nothing, was left outside. We followed our routine, shutting down the generator at 10 p.m., covering the mirror. We got into bed, bracing ourselves for the whispers and the piano music. But there was nothing. Just pure, unbroken silence. "Maybe it's over," Ethan whispered in the dark. "Maybe it just took the gloves as a warning." I didn't answer. I didn't believe it. This felt like the calm before a storm. I must have drifted off to sleep because the next thing I knew, I was being shaken awake. It was Ethan. His hand was clamped over my mouth. My eyes snapped open. I couldn't see anything in the pitch blackness, but I could feel his panic. He took his hand away and leaned close to my ear. "Someone's in the cabin," he breathed. My blood turned to ice. I strained my ears. I could hear it now. It wasn't the sound of walking. It was a soft, wet, shuffling sound. And it was coming from the corner of the room, near the kitchen area. It was accompanied by a faint, rhythmic clicking. I reached for the heavy mag light I kept by my bed. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely grip it. Ethan had his flashlight too. We pointed them in the direction of the sound, our beams crossing in the darkness. On the count of 3, we flicked them on. The creature in the corner was not human. It was hunched over our trash can, its back to us. It was tall and emaciated, its limbs long and thin, bent at odd, unnatural angles. Its skin was pale and slick, like a grub's. It had no hair, no clothes. It was shoveling handfuls of garbage, coffee grounds, chili cans, paper towels, into a wide, gaping mouth that seemed to split the lower half of its head. The clicking sound was its long, claw-like fingers scraping against the metal of the can. It froze as our lights hit it. Slowly, deliberately, it began to turn its head. It turned and turned, its neck twisting at an impossible angle, long past the point a human neck could go. My mind screamed in horror. It was like an owl, but so much worse. When its head was fully backward, it looked at us. It had no eyes, just smooth, pale skin where eyes should be, but we knew it could see us. Its wide mouth, smeared with coffee grounds, stretched into a grotesque, impossibly wide grin. For a second, that stretched into an eternity, we were all frozen. The two of us, paralyzed by fear, and this thing, with its head twisted around, grinning its eyeless grin. Then it let out a sound. It was a high-pitched, chittering shriek that drilled into my skull, and it launched itself at us. Time seemed to slow down. The creature moved with a terrifying, spider-like speed, its long limbs scrambling across the floor. Ethan screamed, a raw, primal sound of pure terror. He rolled off his bed, away from the thing's path, and scrambled towards the back door. I was frozen for a split second too long, my mind unable to process what I was seeing. The creature was on me. It leaped onto my bed, its weight pressing down on my legs, pinning me. I could smell it. It was a foul, gagging stench of damp earth, rotten meat, and that same sweet, cloying perfume that hung over the town. Its eyeless face was inches from mine, the chittering shriek deafening me. I swung my heavy flashlight with all my might, connecting with the side of its head. There was a sickening, wet crunch, like hitting a rotten pumpkin. The creature recoiled, shrieking in pain, and I used that moment to shove it off me. I scrambled off the bed, my feet tangling in the blankets, and fell hard onto the wooden floor. "The generator!" Ethan yelled from the back door. "Turn on the generator!" He was fumbling with a lock on the door in the dark. The creature was already recovering. It shook its head, its long neck whipping back and forth, and then it turned its attention towards Ethan. It lunged. I got to my feet and ran for the front door, yanking it open. "This way!" "Get it outside," I yelled, hoping to draw its attention. The plan was insane, born of pure panic, but it was all we had. The creature paused, its head swiveling between me and Ethan. It seemed confused for a second. That was all the time Ethan needed. He got the back door open and stumbled outside into the pitch-black night. The creature let out another shriek and darted out the back door after him. I ran out the front door and circled around the cabin. I could hear Ethan yelling, the sounds of a desperate struggle, and the horrible chittering of that thing in the darkness. My hands found the generator. I fumbled for the switch and the pull cord. My fingers were numb, clumsy with adrenaline. I pulled the cord. Once, twice. The engine sputtered, but didn't catch. "Hurry!" Ethan screamed. His voice was choked with pain. I pulled again, putting every ounce of my strength into it. The engine roared to life. At the same moment, I flipped the main breaker switch. The floodlight we had rigged up on the back of the cabin blazed on, illuminating the scene in a harsh, white glare. Ethan was on the ground. The creature was on top of him, one of its long, clawed hands wrapped around his throat. Its other hand was raised, its sharp, black talons poised to strike. When the light hit it, the creature flinched violently. It let out a piercing scream, a sound completely different from before. It was a sound of agony. It scrambled off Ethan, shielding its eyeless face from the light, as if the light itself was burning it. It moved with a frantic, jerky speed and disappeared into the darkness beyond the reach of the floodlight. I ran to Ethan. He was gasping for air, clutching his throat. There were 4 deep, bleeding gouges in his neck where the creature's claws had been. His shirt was torn, and there were deep scratches across his chest. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice trembling. It was a stupid question. Of course he wasn't okay. I think so," he coughed, sitting up. It's afraid of the light." We stumbled back into the cabin, a bloody, shaking mess. We slammed and bolted both doors. We didn't turn off the generator. To hell with rule number 2. We left every light in the cabin on, and the floodlight outside. The loud hum of the engine was the most comforting sound in the world. We knew we wouldn't get any sleep. We just sat at the table, watching the doors, until the sun came up. When dawn finally broke, the fear didn't go away. It just changed. The terror of the night was replaced by the cold, hard dread of the day. We were trapped here. The creature was still out there, somewhere in the town, waiting for the dark. And we had broken another rule. A big one. Turn the generator off at 10 p.m. They don't like the noise. We knew we couldn't stay. The job, the money, none of it mattered anymore. All that mattered was getting out of Blackwood Creek alive. "We leave today," I said, my voice hoarse. "We pack our stuff, we get in the car, and we drive until we hit civilization." Ethan just nodded, his face pale, the scratches on his neck a dark, angry red. We cleaned him up as best we could. Then we started packing, throwing our clothes and gear into our bags with frantic haste. Every shadow in the cabin made us jump. Every creak of the old building sounded like the creature returning. I was stuffing my sleeping bag into its sack when Ethan said my name. His voice was quiet, strained. "Jake." I looked up. He was standing by the window, looking out at the main street. "What is it?" "The car," he said. "Look at the car." I went to the window and looked out, and my heart sank into my stomach. All 4 tires on my car were gone. Not just flat. They were completely gone. The car was sitting on its rims in the dirt. And that wasn't all. The doors were ripped from their hinges. The windshield was a spider web of shattered glass. The engine hood was crumpled, as if something immensely strong had stomped on it. My car was destroyed. It was completely and utterly destroyed. We were stranded. I felt a wave of despair so strong it almost buckled my knees. The town wasn't going to let us leave. It had taken my gloves as a souvenir. It had sent that thing as a correction. And now it had taken our only way out. "The service road," Ethan said, his voice desperate. "We can walk. It's 20 miles. We can make it by nightfall if we leave right now." It was a sliver of hope, a tiny, fragile sliver. "Okay," I said, grabbing my backpack. "Okay, let's go. Now." We didn't take much, just water, the last of the beef jerky, and our flashlights. We burst out of the cabin and started walking, almost running down the main street towards the service road that would lead us back to the highway. The town was silent. The morning sun cast long, dark shadows from the old buildings. It felt like every boarded-up window was an eye watching us as we fled. We passed the general store, the blacksmith, the saloon. We walked right through the center of the town square, giving the bell tower a wide berth. I didn't dare look at it. We were almost at the edge of town, where the dirt road began to wind up into the mountains. We could see the start of the trail. We were going to make it. And then the bell began to ring. It wasn't the noon bell. It wasn't the 6 p.m. bell. It wasn't the angry, sporadic ringing from the other day. This was slow, deliberate, a deep, mournful toll. Bong. A pause. Bong, like a funeral dirge. I remembered rule number 3 again. It is not for you. Do not react. But how could we not react? The sound was everywhere, echoing off the mountains, shaking the very ground we stood on. It was a pronouncement, a judgment. Ethan stopped. He turned and looked back at the town. "What is that?" "Don't look, man," I yelled, grabbing his arm. "Rule 3. We have to go." But he was mesmerized, staring at the bell tower. "It feels different this time," he said, his voice distant. "It feels like it's calling for someone." The slow, rhythmic toll continued. Bong! Bong! It was hypnotic. I felt a strange pull, a morbid curiosity to look, to see who was ringing the bell. I had to fight it, shaking my head to clear it. "Ethan, snap out of it." I pulled on his arm, trying to drag him towards the road. "It's a trick. The town is trying to stop us." He wouldn't budge. He was like a statue, his eyes fixed on the tower. "It's so sad," he whispered. I looked back at the bell tower. I couldn't help it. For a split second, my eyes met the dark, open arch where the bell was housed. And I saw him. It was the old man from the diner. He was standing there, holding the long rope to the bell. He was wearing the same overalls, the same flannel shirt, and he was looking right at me. He wasn't pulling the rope now. He just stood there, holding it. And then he did something that made my blood freeze. He smiled. It was a thin, sad, pitying smile. And then he raised one hand and waved, a slow, final goodbye. Seeing the old man snapped me out of my trance. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. He wasn't supposed to be here. He had driven away, back down the mountain. "He's one of them," I breathed, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. The man who gave us the rules, who warned us, was part of the town, part of the trap. The bell gave one last, final toll that seemed to shake my bones, and then fell silent. In that silence, Ethan finally turned away from the tower. But something was different. The desperate urgency was gone from his eyes. It was replaced by a strange, calm resignation. "We can't leave," he said, his voice flat. "What are you talking about?" I yelled, grabbing the front of his shirt. "We have to leave. Did you see him? The old man from the diner? It's a trap, Ethan." "I know," he said, looking past me, his gaze unfocused. "But the bell, it rang for me." "No, it didn't ring for anyone. It's a trick. Rule number 3, man, it's not for you." I was shouting now, my voice raw with panic. He shook his head slowly. "You broke a rule, Jake. You left your gloves out. Rule number 10 says the town corrects the mistake. All corrections are final." He looked me in the eyes then, and what I saw there terrified me more than the creature in the dark. I saw acceptance. "It's not correcting you," he said softly. "It's correcting me." "What does that even mean?" I sobbed, shaking him. "That makes no sense." "It wants a trade," he said, his voice distant. "Your gloves, for me. A souvenir for a souvenir. One item. He was echoing rule number 4, the rule about the stones in the general store. An exact trade. My stomach lurched. The horrifying, twisted logic of it all started to click into place. I had made a mistake, and my best friend was about to pay the price. "No," I said, my voice breaking. "No, I won't let it." I started pulling him again, trying to drag him towards the service road. "We're leaving. Right now." He pulled his arm free from my grasp. He was stronger than I expected. "It's too late, Jake. You have to go. Go now, while you still can." He gave me a small, sad smile. "Tell my mom I'm sorry." And then he turned and started walking back into town. "Ethan!" I screamed his name over and over. "Ethan, no!" He didn't look back. He just kept walking, his steps steady, down the middle of the main street. He walked right towards the town square, towards the bell tower where the old man had been standing. He walked like a man heading to his own execution. I wanted to run after him. Every part of me screamed to go get him, to tackle him and drag him out of there. But a deeper, colder part of me, the part that had seen the creature's claws and the old man's dead smile, knew he was right. It was too late. The town had chosen. I stood there, frozen, helpless, and watched as he walked away. And then they came out, from the doorways of the general store and the saloon, from the dark alleys between the buildings. The residents emerged. It was the woman in the long, dark dress I had seen by the woods. There were others, too. A man in a dusty bowler hat, his face just a blur of shadow. A small child, a little girl in a white smock, who seemed to glide rather than walk. There were half a dozen of them, all tall and unnaturally thin, all moving with a slow, dreamlike grace. They emerged from the shadows and formed a silent procession behind Ethan. They didn't touch him. They just followed, their silent escort, on his final walk. I felt a guttural sob tear from my chest. I couldn't watch any more. I turned and I ran. I ran up the service road, not looking back. I didn't care about the 20 miles. I didn't care about the rocks or the rough terrain. I just ran. Tears were streaming down my face, blurring my vision. The sounds of the town faded behind me, replaced by the ragged sound of my own breathing and the pounding of my heart in my ears. I ran for what felt like hours. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I didn't stop. I was fueled by a terror so profound it went beyond simple fear. It was a soul-deep horror. Every shadow in the woods looked like a resident. Every rustle of leaves sounded like the chittering of the creature from our cabin. Sometime in the afternoon, exhausted and dehydrated, I stumbled and fell, tumbling down a short, steep embankment. I lay there in the dirt and leaves, my body screaming in protest, and I finally let myself cry. I cried for Ethan. I cried for my own stupidity for leaving those damn gloves on the railing. I cried because I had left my best friend behind. I had run away and left him to die. The sun was beginning to set when I finally forced myself to my feet. I had to keep going. I couldn't let his sacrifice be for nothing. I limped on, following the winding dirt road as the sky turned from orange to purple. The darkness in these mountains was not my friend. I was delirious with exhaustion when I finally saw it. A pair of headlights. They were far away, down the mountain, on the main highway. It was the most beautiful sight I had ever seen. Hope, fierce and desperate, surged through me. I stumbled out of the woods and onto the paved road, waving my arms frantically. The car, A beat-up pickup truck slowed down and pulled over. An old man with a kind, wrinkled face rolled down the window. "Son, you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Please," I gasped, leaning against the door of his truck. "Please, you have to help me. My friend, he's still up there." The man's kind expression tightened. He looked past me, up the dark service road I had just come down. "Up there?" he asked, his voice suddenly wary. "Son, there ain't nothing up that road but Blackwood Creek, and nobody's gone up there in 50 years. He looked at me, at my torn clothes, my wild eyes. "Nobody's come back anyway." He told me to get in. He drove me to the nearest town, to the sheriff's office. I told them everything, the job ad, the old man at the diner, the rules, the creature, Ethan. I know how I must have sounded. I sounded insane. They sent a search party the next morning. 2 deputies. I begged to go with them, but they wouldn't let me. I sat in the sterile waiting room of the sheriff's office for hours, staring at the clock. They came back just after lunch. Their faces were grim. "We drove all the way to the end of that service road," the sheriff told me, his voice gentle but firm. "There's nothing there, son. The road washes out about 5 miles in. There's no town, no cabins. Never has been, far as anyone knows." "No," I insisted, standing up. "It's there. You just have to look." He shook his head sadly. "We found your car, though. Pushed into a ravine about a mile from the highway. Looks like you had a bad accident." He thought I was crazy. He thought I'd crashed my car, gotten a head injury, and hallucinated the whole thing. He thought Ethan had wandered off into the woods after the crash, dazed and confused. They searched for him for a week. They found nothing. No body, no trace. He was just gone. They eventually let me go. My parents drove out to get me. They didn't ask too many questions. I think they were just so relieved I was alive, they didn't want to push it. They saw the official report. A car accident. A missing friend presumed lost to the wilderness. It was a neat, simple tragedy. It was a lie. I know what happened. I know the town is there. It's waiting. It keeps its souvenirs. I left my gloves, and it took Ethan, an exact trade. I live with that every single day. I see his face when I close my eyes. I hear the sound of that final, lonely bell. He's gone because of me, and the world doesn't even know he's a ghost in a town that isn't supposed to exist. Seeing the old man snapped me out of my trance. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. He wasn't supposed to be here. He had driven away, back down the mountain, back to the real world. "He's one of them," I breathed, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. The man who gave us the rules, who warned us, was part of the town, a gatekeeper, part of the trap. The bell gave one last, final toll that seemed to shake my bones, and then it fell silent. In that deafening silence, Ethan finally turned his head away from the tower, but something in him was broken. The desperate urgency to escape was gone from his eyes. It was replaced by a strange, calm, horrifying resignation. "We can't leave, Jake," he said, his voice flat and empty. "What are you talking about?" I yelled, grabbing the front of his shirt, my knuckles pressing into his chest. "We have to leave. Did you see him? The old man from the diner? It's a trap, Ethan. It's all been a trap." "I know," he said, and his gaze was unfocused, looking right through me. "But the bell, it rang for me." "No, it didn't ring for anyone. It's a trick." I was shouting now, my voice raw with panic and disbelief. "Rule number 3, man. It says it's not for you." He shook his head slowly, a tiny, sad movement. You broke a rule, Jake. You left your gloves out. And rule number 10 says the town corrects the mistake. It says all corrections are final. He looked me in the eyes then, and what I saw there terrified me more than the creature in the dark, more than the pale faces in the windows. I saw acceptance. It's not correcting you, he said softly, his voice barely a whisper. It's correcting me. What does that even mean? I sobbed, shaking him, trying to rattle the sense back into him. That makes no sense at all. It wants a trade, he said, his voice as distant as the mountains. Your gloves, for me. A souvenir for a souvenir. One item. He was echoing rule number 4, the rule about the stones in the general store. An exact trade. My stomach lurched as the bile rose in my throat. The horrifying, twisted logic of it all started to click into place, like tumblers in a lock opening a door to hell. I had made a small, stupid mistake, and my best friend was about to pay the ultimate price for it. No, I said, my voice breaking. No, I won't let it. I won't let you. I started pulling him again, my fingers digging into his arm, trying to drag him towards the service road and away from the nightmare. We're leaving. Right now. He pulled his arm free from my grasp with a strength that shocked me. It's too late, Jake, he said, and his voice was firm, now resolved. You have to go. Go now, while you still can. He gave me a small, sad smile that will haunt me until the day I die. Tell my mom I'm sorry. And then he turned his back on me and started walking back into town. Ethan! I screamed his name, over and over, the sound tearing from my throat. Ethan, no, please. He didn't look back. He didn't even hesitate. He just kept walking, his steps steady and sure, right down the middle of the main street. He walked right towards the town square, towards the stone bell tower where the old man had been standing just moments before. He walked like a man who had already accepted he was dead. I wanted to run after him. Every instinct, every fiber of my being screamed to go get him, to tackle him to the ground and drag him out of there, kicking and screaming if I had to. But a deeper, colder part of me, the part that had seen the creature's claws and the old man's dead smile, knew he was right. It was too late. The town had made its choice. The bell had rung for him. I stood there on the edge of the road, frozen, helpless, and watched as my best friend in the entire world walked away from me forever. And then they came out. From the dark doorways of the general store and the saloon, from the black alleys between the boarded-up buildings, the residents emerged. It was the woman in the long, dark dress I had seen by the woods. There were others, too. A man in a dusty bowler hat, his face just a blur of shadow. A small child, a little girl in a white smock, who seemed to glide rather than walk across the dirt. There were half a dozen of them, all tall and unnaturally thin, all moving with a slow, dreamlike grace. They emerged from the shadows and formed a silent procession behind Ethan. They didn't touch him. They just followed, a silent, ghostly honor guard on his final walk. I felt a guttural sob tear from my chest. I couldn't watch anymore. I turned and I ran. I ran up the service road, my feet pounding on the gravel, not daring to look back. I didn't care about the 20 miles. I didn't care about the rocks or the rough terrain. I just ran. Tears were streaming down my face, blurring my vision of the trail ahead. The sounds of the town, of the terrible final bell, faded behind me, replaced by the ragged sound of my own breathing and the desperate, frantic pounding of my heart in my ears. I ran for what felt like hours. My lungs were on fire. My legs ached with a deep, burning pain. But I didn't stop. I was fueled by a terror so profound it went beyond simple fear. It was a soul-deep horror. Every twisted shadow in the woods looked like a resident waiting for me. Every rustle of leaves in the wind sounded like the chittering of the creature from our cabin. Sometime in the late afternoon, utterly exhausted and dehydrated, I stumbled over a root and fell, tumbling down a short, steep embankment. I lay there in the dirt and leaves, my body screaming in protest, and I finally let myself cry. I cried for Ethan, for his stupid, brave sacrifice. I cried for my own carelessness for leaving those damn gloves on the railing. I cried because I had left my best friend behind. I had run away and left him to die alone. The sun was beginning to set when I finally forced myself to my feet. I had to keep going. I couldn't let his sacrifice be for nothing. I limped on, following the winding dirt road as the sky turned from a brilliant orange to a deep, bruised purple. The darkness in these mountains was not my friend, and I had to get out before it swallowed me too. I was delirious with exhaustion when I finally saw it. A pair of headlights. They were far away, down the mountain on the main highway. It was the most beautiful, most wonderful sight I had ever seen. Hope, fierce and desperate and powerful, surged through me, giving me one last burst of strength. I stumbled out of the woods and onto the paved road, waving my arms frantically like a madman. The car, a beat-up old pickup truck, slowed down and pulled over. An old man with a kind, wrinkled face and a baseball cap rolled down the window. "Son, you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Please," I gasped, leaning against the door of his truck, my legs about to give out. "Please, you have to help me. My friend is still up there." The man's kind expression tightened. He looked past me, up the dark, foreboding service road I had just come down. "Up there?" he asked, his voice suddenly wary, suspicious. "Son, there ain't nothing up that road but Blackwood Creek, and nobody's gone up there in 50 years. He looked at me, at my torn clothes, my wild, terrified eyes. "Nobody's come back from there anyway." He told me to get in. He drove me to the nearest town, to the sheriff's office. I told them everything, the job ad, the old man at the diner, the list of rules, the creature, Ethan walking back into the town. I know how I must have sounded. I sounded completely insane. They sent a search party the next morning, 2 deputies in a 4-wheel drive. I begged them to let me go with them, but they wouldn't let me. I sat in the sterile, silent waiting room of the sheriff's office for hours, staring at the clock, my leg bouncing with anxiety. They came back just after lunch. Their faces were grim and tight. "We drove all the way to the end of that service road," the sheriff told me, his voice gentle but firm, the way you talk to a child or a crazy person. "There's nothing there, son. The road washes out about 5 miles in. There's no town, no cabins, never has been, far as anyone around here knows." "No," I insisted, standing up, my voice rising. "It's there. You just have to look harder. It's there." He shook his head sadly. "We found your car, though. Pushed into a ravine about a mile from the highway. Looks like you had a bad accident. Probably hit your head." He thought I was crazy. He thought I'd crashed my car, gotten a concussion, and hallucinated the entire thing. He thought Ethan had wandered off into the woods after the crash, dazed and confused. They searched for him for a week, They found nothing, no body, no clothes, no trace that he had ever been there. He was just gone. They eventually let me go. My parents drove out to get me. They didn't ask too many questions. I think they were just so relieved that I was alive, they didn't want to push it. They saw the official report. A tragic car accident. A missing friend presumed lost to the unforgiving wilderness. It was a neat, simple, understandable tragedy. It was a lie. I know what happened. I know that town is real. It's waiting up there, in the mountains, hidden from the world. It gets lonely. It likes to keep souvenirs. I left my gloves, and it took Ethan. An exact trade. I live with that knowledge every single day. I see his face when I close my eyes. I hear the sound of that final, lonely bell. He's gone because of me. And the world doesn't even know that he's a ghost in a town that isn't supposed to exist. So, tonight, when you're in your warm, safe house and you hear the wind howl outside, I want you to do something for me. I want you to think of my friend Ethan. Think of a 19-year-old kid who was brave and loyal and who paid for my mistake. Just for a second, remember a boy who was taken by a town that doesn't exist. Remember him so he's not completely alone in the dark.